Chapter 18. Fashion and Physiology. Please, sir, I guess you'd better step up right away, or it will be too late, for I heard Miss Rose say she knew you wouldn't like it, and she'd never dare to let you see her. Phoebe said this as she popped her head into the study where Dr. Alec sat reading a new book. "They are at it, are they?" he said, looking up quickly and giving himself a shake as if ready for a battle of some sort. "Yes, sir, as hard as they can talk, and Miss Rose don't seem to know what to do, for the things are ever so stylish, and she looks elegant in 'em, though I like her best in the old ones," answered Phoebe. "You are a girl of sense. I'll settle matters for Rosie, and you'll lend a hand. Is everything ready in her room, and are you sure you understand how they go?" "Oh, yes, sir, but they are so funny. I know Miss Rose will think it's a joke." And Phoebe laughed as if something tickled her immensely. "Never mind what she thinks so long as she obeys. Tell her to do it for my sake, and she will find it the best joke she ever saw. I expect to have a tough time of it, but we'll win yet," said the doctor, as he marched upstairs with the book in his hand and an odd smile on his face. There was such a clatter of tongues in the sewing room that no one heard his tap at the door, so he pushed it open and took an observation. Aunt Plenty, Aunt Clara, and Aunt Jessie were all absorbed in gazing at Rose, who slowly revolved between them and the great mirror in a full winter costume of the latest fashion. "Bless my heart, worse even than I expected," thought the doctor, with an inward groan, for to his benighted eyes the girl looked like a trussed fowl, and the fine new dress had neither grace, beauty, nor fitness to recommend it.
The suit was of two peculiar shades of blue, so arranged that patches of light and dark distracted the eye. The upper skirt was tied so lightly back that it was impossible to take a long step, and the under one was so loaded with plaited frills that it wobbled, no other word will express it, ungracefully, both fore and aft. A bunch of folds was gathered up just below the waist behind, and a great bow rode atop. A small velvet jacket of the same material was adorned with a high ruff at the back and laid well open over the breast to display some lace and a locket. Heavy fringes, bows, puffs, ruffles, and revers finished off the dress, making one's head ache to think of the amount of work wasted, for not a single graceful line struck the eye, and the beauty of the material was quite lost in the profusion of ornament. A high velvet hat, audaciously turned up in front, with a bunch of pink roses and a sweeping plume, was cocked over one ear and, with her curls braided into a club at the back of her neck, Rose's head looked more like that of a dashing young cavalier than a modest little girl's. High-heeled boots tilted her well forward, a tiny muff pinioned her arms, and a spotted veil tied so closely over her face that her eyelashes were rumpled by it, gave the last touch of absurdity to her appearance. "Now she looks like other girls, and as I like to see her," Mrs. Clara was saying, with an air of great satisfaction. "She does look like a fashionable young lady, but somehow I miss my little Rose, for children dressed like children in my day," answered Aunt Plenty, peering through her glasses with a troubled look, for she could not imagine the creature before her ever sitting in her lap, running to wait upon her, or making the house gay with a child's blithe presence.
"Things have changed since your day, Aunt, and it takes time to get used to new ways. But you, Jessie, surely like this costume better than the dowdy things Rose has been wearing all summer. Now be honest and own you do," said Mrs. Clara, bent on being praised for her work. "Well, dear, to be quite honest then, I think it is frightful," answered Mrs. Jessie, with a candor that caused revolving Rose to stop in dismay. "Hear, hear!" cried a deep voice. And with a general start, the ladies became aware that the enemy was among them. Rose blushed up to her hat brim and stood, looking, as she felt, like a fool, while Mrs. Clara hastened to explain. Of course, I don't expect you to like it, Alec, but I don't consider you a judge of what is proper and becoming for a young lady. Therefore, I have taken the liberty of providing a pretty street suit for Rose. She need not wear it if you object, for I know we promised to let you do what you liked for the poor dear for a year. It is a street costume, is it? Asked the doctor mildly. Do you know, I never should have guessed that it was meant for winter weather and brisk locomotion. Take a turn, Rosie, and let me see all its beauties and advantages. Rose tried to walk off with her usual free tread, but the underskirt got in her way, the overskirt was so tight she could not take a long step, and her boots made it impossible to carry herself perfectly erect. I haven't got used to it yet, she said petulantly, kicking at her train as she turned to toddle back again. Suppose a mad dog or a runaway horse was after you. Could you get out of the way without upsetting, Colonel? Asked the doctor, with a twinkle in the eyes that were fixed on the rakish hat.
Don't think I could, but I'll try. And Rose made a rush across the room. Her boot heels caught on a rug, several strings broke, her hat tipped over her eyes, and she plunged promiscuously into a chair, where she sat laughing so infectiously that all but Mrs. Clara joined in her mirth. I should say that a walking suit in which one could not walk, and a winter suit which exposes the throat, head, and feet to cold and damp was rather a failure, Clara, especially as it has no beauty to reconcile one to its utter unfitness, said Dr. Alec as he helped Rose undo her veil, adding in a low tone, Nice thing for the eyes. You'll soon see spots when it's off as well as when it's on, and by be a case for an oculist. No beauty? Cried Mrs. Clara warmly. Now that is just a man's blindness. This is the best of silk and camel's hair, real ostrich feathers, and an expensive ermine muff. What could be in better taste or more proper for a young girl? I'll show you if Rose will go to her room and oblige me by putting on what she finds there, answered the doctor with unexpected readiness. Alec, if it is a bloomer, I shall protest. I've been expecting it, but I know I cannot bear to see that pretty child sacrificed to your wild ideas of health. Tell me it isn't a bloomer. And Mrs. Clara clasped her hands imploringly. It is not. Thank heaven. And she resigned herself with a sigh of relief, adding plaintively, I did hope you'd accept my suit, for poor Rose has been afflicted with frightful clothes long enough to spoil the taste of any girl. You talk of my afflicting the child and then make a helpless guy like that of her, answered the doctor, pointing to the little fashion plate that was scuttling out of sight as fast as it could go. He closed the door with a shrug, but before anyone could speak, his quick eye fell upon an object which caused him to frown and demand in an indignant tone, After all I have said, were you really going to tempt my girl with those abominable things? I thought we'd put them away when she wouldn't wear them, murmured Mrs. Clara, whisking a little pair of corsets out of sight with guilty haste. I only brought them to try, for Rose is growing stout and will have no figure if it is not attended to soon, she added, with an air of calm conviction that roused the doctor still more, for this was one of his especial abominations. Growing stout! Yes, thank heaven she is, and shall continue to do it, for nature knows how to mold a woman better than any corset maker, and I won't have her interfered with. My dear Clara, have you lost your senses, that you can for a moment dream of putting a growing girl into an instrument of torture like this? And with a sudden gesture, he plucked forth the offending corsets from under the sofa cushion and held them out with the expression one would wear on beholding the thumbscrews or the rack of ancient times. Don't be absurd, Alec. There is no torture about it, for tight lacing is out of fashion, and we have nice, sensible things nowadays. Everyone wears them. Even babies have stiffened waists to support their weak little backs, began Mrs. Clara, rushing to the defense of the pet delusion of most women. I know it, and so the poor little souls have weak backs all their days, as their mothers had before them. It is vain to argue the matter, and I won't try. But I wish to state, once for all, that if I ever see a pair of corsets near Rose, I'll put them in the fire, and you may send the bill to me."
As he spoke, the corsets were on their way to destruction, but Mrs. Jessie caught his arm, exclaiming merrily, "Don't burn them, for mercy's sake, Alec. They are full of whalebones and will make a dreadful odor. Give them to me. I'll see that they do no harm." Whalebones, indeed, a regular fence of them, and metal gateposts in front. As if our own bones were not enough, if we'd give them a chance to do their duty, growled the doctor, yielding up the bone of contention with a last shake of contempt. Then his face cleared suddenly, and he held up his finger, saying with a smile, "Hear those girls laugh. Cramped lungs could not make hearty music like that." Peals of laughter issued from Rose's room, and smiles involuntarily touched the lips of those who listened to the happy sound. "Some new prank of yours, Alec?" asked Aunt Plenty, indulgently, for she had come to believe in most of her nephew's odd notions because they seemed to work so well. "Yes, ma'am, my last, and I hope you will like it. I discovered what Clara was at and got my rival's suit ready for today. I'm not going to afflict Rose, but let her choose, and if I'm not entirely mistaken, she will like my rig best. While we wait, I'll explain, and then you will appreciate the general effect better. I got hold of this little book and was struck with its good sense and good taste, for it suggests a way to clothe women both healthfully and handsomely, and that is a great point. It begins at the foundations, as you will see if you will look at these pictures, and I should think women would rejoice at this lightening of their burdens." As he spoke, the doctor laid the book before Aunt Plenty, who obediently brought her spectacles to bear upon the illustrations, and after a long look, exclaimed with a scandalized face,
"Mercy on us, these things are like the night drawers Jamie wears. You don't mean to say you want Rose to come out in this costume? It's not proper, and I won't consent to it." "I do mean it, and I'm sure my sensible aunt will consent when she understands that these, well, I'll call them by an Indian name and say pajamas, are for underwear, and Rose can have as pretty frocks as she likes outside. These 2 suits of flannel, each in one piece from head to foot, with a skirt or so hung on this easily fitting waist, will keep the child warm without burdening her with belts and gathers and buckles and bunches round the waist, and leave free the muscles that need plenty of room to work in. She shall never have the backache if I can help it, nor the long list of ills you dear women think you cannot escape. I don't consider it modest, and I'm sure Rose will be shocked at it," began Mrs. Clara, but stopped suddenly as Rose appeared in the doorway, not looking shocked a bit. "Come on, my hygienic model, and let us see you," said her uncle, with an approving glance, as she walked in looking so mischievously merry that it was evident she enjoyed the joke. "Well, I don't see anything remarkable. That is a neat, plain suit. The materials are good, and it's not unbecoming if you want her to look like a little schoolgirl, but it has not a particle of style, and no one would ever give it a second glance," said Mrs. Clara, feeling that her last remark condemned the whole thing. "Exactly what I want," answered the provoking doctor, rubbing his hands with a satisfied air. "Rosie looks now like what she is, a modest little girl who does not want to be stared at. I think she would get a glance of approval, though, from people who like sense and simplicity rather than fuss and feathers. Revolve, my Hebe, and let me refresh my eyes by the sight of you."
There was very little to see, however, only a pretty Gabrielle dress of a soft, warm shade of brown, coming to the tops of a trim pair of boots with low heels, a sealskin sack, cap and mittens, with a glimpse of scarlet at the throat, and the pretty curls tied up with a bright velvet of the same color completed the external adornment, making her look like a robin redbreast, wintry yet warm. "How do you like it, Rosie?" asked the doctor, feeling that her opinion was more important to the success of his new idea than that of all the aunts on the hill.
I feel very odd and light, but I'm warm as a toast, and nothing seems to be in my way," answered Rose, with a skip which displayed shapely gaiters on legs that now might be as free and active as a boy's under the modest skirts of the girl. "You can run away from the mad dogs and walk off at a smart pace without tumbling on your nose now, I fancy." "Yes, Uncle. Suppose the dog coming, I just hop over a wall so, and when I walk of a cold day, I go like this." Entering fully into the spirit of the thing, Rose swung herself over the high back of the sofa as easily as one of her cousins, and then went down the long hall as if her stout boots were related to the famous 7 leaguers. "There, you see how it will be. Dress her in that boyish way and she will act like a boy. I do hate all these inventions of strong-minded women," exclaimed Mrs. Clara as Rose came back at a run. "Ah, but you see, some of these sensible inventions come from the brain of a fashionable modiste who will make you more lovely, or what you value more, stylish, outside, and comfortable within. Mrs. Van Tassel has been to Madame Stone and is wearing a full suit of this sort. Van himself told me, when I asked how she was, that she had given up lying on the sofa and was going about in a most astonishing way, considering her feeble health."
You don't say so. Let me see that book a moment. And Aunt Clara examined the new patterns with a more respectful air, for if the elegant Mrs. Van Tassel wore these dreadful things, it would never do to be left behind, in spite of her prejudices. Dr. Alec looked at Mrs. Jessie and both smiled, for little Mum had been in the secret and enjoyed it mightily. "I thought that would settle it," he said with a nod. "I didn't wait for Mrs. Van to lead the way, and for once in my life I have adopted a new fashion before Clara. My freedom suit is ordered, and you may see me playing tag with Rose and the boys before long," answered Mrs. Jessie, nodding back at him. Meantime, Aunt Plenty was examining Rose's costume, for the hat and sack were off, and the girl was eagerly explaining the undergarments. "See, Auntie, all nice scarlet flannel and a gay little petticoat and long stockings. Oh, so warm. Phoebe and I nearly died laughing when I put this rig on, but I like it ever so much. The dress is so comfortable and doesn't need any belt or sash, and I can sit without rumpling any trimming. That's such a comfort. I like to be tidy. And so, when I wear fussed-up things, I'm thinking of my clothes all the time, and that's tiresome. Do say you like it. I resolved I would, just to please Uncle, for he does know more about health than anyone else, I'm sure, and I'd wear a bag if he asked me to do it." "I don't ask that, Rose, but I wish you'd weigh and compare the 2 suits, and then choose which seems best. I leave it to your own common sense," answered Dr. Alec, feeling pretty sure he had won.
"Why, I take this one, of course, Uncle. The other is fashionable, and yes, I must say I think it's pretty, but it's very heavy, and I should have to go round like a walking doll if I wore it. I'm much obliged to Auntie, but I'll keep this, please." Rose spoke gently but decidedly, though there was a look of regret when her eye fell on the other suit which Phoebe had brought in, and it was very natural to like to look as other girls did. Aunt Clara sighed. Uncle Alec smiled and said heartily, "Thank you, dear. Now read this book, and you will understand why I ask it of you. Then, if you like, I'll give you a new lesson. You asked for one yesterday, and this is more necessary than French or housekeeping." "Oh, what?" And Rose caught up the book which Mrs. Clara had thrown down with a disgusted look. Though Dr. Alec was 40, the boyish love of teasing was not yet dead in him, and, being much elated at his victory, he could not resist the temptation of shocking Mrs. Clara by suggesting dreadful possibilities. So he answered, half in earnest, half in jest, "Physiology, Rose. Wouldn't you like to be a little medical student with Uncle Doctor for teacher, and be ready to take up his practice when he has to stop? If you agree, I'll hunt up my old skeleton tomorrow." That was too much for Aunt Clara, and she hastily departed, with her mind in a sad state of perturbation about Mrs. Van Tassel's new costume and Rose's new study.
Chapter 19. Brother Bones. Rose accepted her uncle's offer, as Aunt Myra discovered 2 or 3 days later. Coming in for an early call and hearing voices in the study, she opened the door, gave a cry, and shut it quickly, looking a good deal startled. The doctor appeared in a moment and begged to know what the matter was. "How can you ask when that long box looks so like a coffin? I thought it was one, and that dreadful thing stared me in the face as I opened the door," answered Mrs. Myra, pointing to the skeleton that hung from the chandelier, cheerfully grinning at all beholders. "This is a medical college where women are freely admitted, so walk in, madame, and join the class if you'll do me the honor," said the doctor, waving her forward with his politest bow. "Do, Auntie! It's perfectly splendid!" cried Rose's voice, and Rose's blooming face was seen behind the ribs of the skeleton, smiling and nodding in the gayest possible manner. "What are you doing, child?" demanded Aunt Myra, dropping into a chair and staring about her. "Oh, I'm learning bones today, and I like it so much. There are 12 ribs, you know, and the 2 lower ones are called floating ribs because they're not fastened to the breastbone. That's why they go in so easily if you lace tight and squeeze the lungs and heart in the, let me see, what was that big word? Oh, I know, thoracic cavity." And Rose beamed with pride as she aired her little bit of knowledge. "Do you think that is a good sort of thing for her to be poking over? She is a nervous child, and I'm afraid it will be bad for her," said Aunt Myra, watching Rose as she counted vertebrae and waggled a hip joint in its socket with an inquiring expression. "An excellent study, for she enjoys it, and I mean to teach her how to manage her nerves so that they won't be a curse to her, as many a woman's become through ignorance or want of thought. To make a mystery or terror of these things is a mistake, and I mean Rose shall understand and respect her body so well that she won't dare to trifle with it, as most women do." "And she really likes it?" "Very much, Auntie. It's all so wonderful and so nicely planned. You can hardly believe what you see. Just think. There are 600 million air cells in one pair of lungs, and 2,000 pores to a square inch of surface. So you see what quantities of air we must have, and what care we should take of our skin so all the little doors will open and shut right. And brains, Auntie, you've no idea how curious they are. I haven't got to them yet, but I long to, and Uncle is going to show me a mannequin that you can take to pieces. Just think how nice it will be to see all the organs in their places. I only wish they could be made to work as ours do." It was funny to see Aunt Myra's face as Rose stood before her talking rapidly, with one hand laid in the friendliest manner on the skeleton's shoulder. Every word both the doctor and Rose uttered hit the good lady in her weakest spot. And as she looked and listened, a long array of bottles and pill boxes rose up before her, reproaching her with the ignorance and want of thought that made her what she was, a nervous, dyspeptic, unhappy old woman. "Well, I don't know, but you may be right, Alec, only I wouldn't carry it too far. Women don't need much of the sort of knowledge and are not fit for it. I couldn't bear to touch that ugly thing, and it gives me the creeps to hear about organs," said Aunt Myra, with a sigh and her hand on her side. "Wouldn't it be a comfort to know that your liver was on the right side, Auntie, and not on the left?" asked Rose with a naughty laugh in her eyes, for she had lately learnt that Aunt Myra's liver complaint was not in the proper place. "It's a dying world, child, and it don't much matter where the pain is, for sooner or later we all drop off and are seen no more," was Aunt Myra's cheerful reply.
Well, I intend to know what kills me if I can, and meantime, I'm going to enjoy myself in spite of a dying world. I wish you'd do so too, and come and study with Uncle. It would do you good, I'm sure." And Rose went back to counting vertebrae with such a happy face that Aunt Myra had not the heart to say a word to dampen her ardor. Perhaps it's as well to let her do what she likes the little while she is with us. But pray be careful of her, Alec, and not allow her to overwork, she whispered as she went out. That's exactly what I'm trying to do, ma'am, and rather a hard job I find it, he added as he shut the door, for the dear aunts were dreadfully in his way sometimes. Half an hour later came another interruption in the shape of Mac, who announced his arrival by the brief but elegant remark, "Hello, what new game is this?" Rose explained. Mac gave a long whistle of surprise, and then took a promenade round the skeleton, observing, "Brother Bones looks very jolly, but I can't say much for his beauty." "You mustn't make fun of him, for he's a good old fellow, and you'd be just as ugly if your flesh was off," said Rose, defending her new friend with warmth. "I dare say, so I'll keep my flesh on, thank you. You are so busy you can't read to a fellow, I suppose?" asked Mac, whose eyes were better, but still too weak for books.
"Don't you want to come and join my class? Uncle explains it all to us, and you can take a look at the plates as they come along. We'll give up Bones today and have eyes instead. That will be more interesting to you," added Rose, seeing no ardent thirst for physiological information in his face. "Rose, we must not fly about from one thing to another in this way," began Dr. Alec, but she whispered quickly, with a nod towards Mac, whose goggles were turned wistfully in the direction of the forbidden books. "He's blue today, and we must amuse him. Give a little lecture on eyes, and it will do him good. No matter about me, Uncle." "Very well. The class will please be seated." And the doctor gave a sounding rap on the table. "Come, sit by me, dear. Then we can both see the pictures. And if your head gets tired, you can lie down," said Rose, generously opening her little college to a brother and kindly providing for the weaknesses that all humanity is subject to. Side by side they sat and listened to a very simple explanation of the mechanism of the eye, finding it as wonderful as a fairy tale, for fine plates illustrated it, and a very willing teacher did his best to make the lesson pleasant. Jove! If I'd known what mischief I was doing to that mighty delicate machine of mine, you wouldn't have caught me reading by firelight or studying with a glare of sunshine on my book," said Mac, peering solemnly at a magnified eyeball. Then pushing it away, he added indignantly, "Why isn't a fellow taught all about his works, and how to manage them, and not left to go blundering into all sorts of worries? Telling him after he's down isn't much use, for then he's found it out himself and won't thank you."
Chapter 18. Fashion and Physiology. "Please, sir, I guess you'd better step up right away, or it will be too late, for I heard Miss Rose say she knew you wouldn't like it, and she'd never dare to let you see her." Phoebe said this as she popped her head into the study where Dr. Alec sat reading a new book. "They are at it, are they?" he said, looking up quickly and giving himself a shake as if ready for a battle of some sort. "Yes, sir, as hard as they can talk, and Miss Rose don't seem to know what to do, for the things are ever so stylish, and she looks elegant in 'em, though I like her best in the old ones," answered Phoebe. "You are a girl of sense. I'll settle matters for Rosie, and you'll lend a hand. Is everything ready in her room, and are you sure you understand how they go?" "Oh, yes, sir, but they are so funny. I know Miss Rose will think it's a joke." And Phoebe laughed as if something tickled her immensely. "Never mind what she thinks so long as she obeys. Tell her to do it for my sake, and she will find it the best joke she ever saw. I expect to have a tough time of it, but we'll win yet," said the doctor as he marched upstairs with the book in his hand and an odd smile on his face. There was such a clatter of tongues in the sewing room that no one heard his tap at the door, so he pushed it open and took an observation. Aunt Plenty, Aunt Clara, and Aunt Jessie were all absorbed in gazing at Rose, who slowly revolved between them and the great mirror in a full winter costume of the latest fashion. "Bless my heart, worse even than I expected," thought the doctor, with an inward groan, for to his benighted eyes the girl looked like a trussed fowl, and the fine new dress had neither grace, beauty, nor fitness to recommend it.
Fatherly and motherly hearts often beat warm and wise in the breasts of bachelor uncles and maiden aunts, and it is my private opinion that these worthy creatures are a beautiful provision of nature for the cherishing of other people's children. They certainly get great comfort out of it, and receive much innocent affection that otherwise would be lost. Dr. Alec was one of these, and his big heart had room for every one of the 8 cousins, especially orphaned Rose and afflicted Mac. So, when the boy uttered that unconscious reproach to his parents, and Rose added with a sigh, "It must be beautiful to have a mother," the good doctor yearned over them, and shutting his book with a decided slam, said in that cordial voice of his, "Now look here, children, you just come and tell me all your worries, and with God's help, I'll settle them for you. That is what I'm here for, I believe, and it will be a great happiness to me if you can trust me." "We can, Uncle, and we will," both answered, with a heartiness that gratified him much. "Good. Now school is dismissed, and I advise you to go and refresh your 600 million air cells by a brisk run in the garden. Come again whenever you like, Mac, and we'll teach you all we can about your works, as you call them, so you can keep them running smoothly." "Will come, sir. Much obliged." And the class in physiology went out to walk. Mac did come again, glad to find something he could study in spite of his weak eyes, and learned much that was of more value than anything his school had ever taught him. Of course, the other lads made great fun of the whole thing, and plagued Dr. Alec's students half out of their lives.
But they kept on persistently, and one day something happened which made the other fellows behave themselves forever after. It was a holiday, and Rose, up in her room, thought she heard the voices of her cousins, so she ran down to welcome them, but found no one there. "Never mind, they will be here soon, and then we'll have a frolic," she said to herself, and thinking she had been mistaken, she went into the study to wait. She was lounging over the table looking at a map when an odd noise caught her ear. A gentle tapping somewhere, and following the sound, it seemed to come from the inside of the long case in which the skeleton lived when not professionally engaged. This case stood upright in a niche between 2 bookcases at the back of the room, a darkish corner where Brother Bones, as the boys would call him, was out of the way. As Rose stood looking in that direction and wondering if a rat had got shut in, the door of the case swung slowly open, and with a great start she saw a bony arm lifted and a bony finger beckon to her. For a minute she was frightened and ran to the study door with a fluttering heart. But just as she touched the handle, a queer, stifled sort of giggle made her stop short and turn red with anger. She paused an instant to collect herself, and then went softly toward the bony beckoner. A nearer look revealed black threads tied to the arm and fingers, the ends of threads disappearing through holes bored in the back of the case. Peeping into the dark recess, she also caught sight of the tip of an elbow covered with a rough gray cloth which she knew very well. Quick as a flash, she understood the joke. Her fear vanished, and with a wicked smile, she whipped out her scissors, cut the threads, and the bony arm dropped with a rattle. Before she could say, "Come out, Charlie, and let my skeleton alone," a sudden eruption of boys, all in a high state of tickle, proclaimed to the hidden rogue that his joke was a failure. "I told him not to do it because it might give you a start," explained Archie, emerging from the closet. "I had a smelling bottle all ready as she fainted away," added Steve, popping up from behind the great chair. "It's too bad of you not to squawk and run. We depended on it. It's such fun to howl after you," said Will and Geordie, rolling out from under the sofa in a promiscuous heap. "You are getting altogether too strong-minded, Rose. Most girls would have been in a jolly twitter to see this old fellow waggling his finger at them," complained Charlie, squeezing out from his tight quarters, dusty and disgusted. "I'm used to your pranks now, so I'm always on the watch and prepared. But I won't have Brother Bones made fun of. I know Uncle wouldn't like it, so please don't," began Rose, just as Dr. Alec came in, and, seeing the state of the case at a glance, he said quietly, "Hear how I got that skeleton, and then I'm sure you will treat it with respect." The boys settled down at once on any article of furniture that was nearest and listened dutifully. Years ago, when I was in the hospital, a poor fellow was brought there with a rare and very painful disease. There was no hope for him, but we did our best. And he was so grateful that when he died, he left us his body, that we might discover the mysteries of his complaint, and so be able to help others afflicted in the same way.
It did do good, and his brave patience made us remember him long after he was gone. He thought I had been kind to him and said to a fellow student of mine, "Tell the doctor I lave him me bones, for I've nothing else in the wide world, and I'll nos be wanting 'em at all, when the great pain had kilt me entirely." So that is how they came to be mine, and why I've kept them carefully. For, though only a poor, ignorant fellow, Mike Nolan did what he could to help others and prove his gratitude to those who tried to help him. As Dr. Alec paused, Archie closed the door of the case as respectfully as if the mummy of an Egyptian king was inside. Will and Geordie looked solemnly at one another, evidently much impressed, and Charlie pensively remarked from the coal hod where he sat, "I've often heard of a skeleton in the house, but I think few people have one as useful and as interesting as ours."
Chapter 20. Under the Mistletoe. Rose made Phoebe promise that she would bring her stocking into the bower, as she called her pretty room, on Christmas morning, because that first delicious rummage loses half its charm if two little nightcaps at least do not meet over the treasures, and two happy voices, oh and ah, together. So when Rose opened her eyes that day, they fell upon faithful Phoebe, rolled up in a shawl, sitting on the rug before a blazing fire, with her untouched stocking laid beside her. "Merry Christmas!" cried the little mistress, smiling gaily. "Merry Christmas!" answered the little maid, so heartily that it did one good to hear her. "Bring the stockings right away, Phoebe, and let's see what we've got," said Rose, sitting up among the pillows and looking as eager as a child. A pair of long knobby hose were laid out upon the coverlet, and their contents examined with delight, though each knew every blessed thing that had been put into the other's stocking. Never mind what they were, it is evident that they were quite satisfactory, for as Rose leaned back, she said with a luxurious sigh of satisfaction, "Now I believe I've got everything in the world that I want." And Phoebe answered, smiling over a lapful of treasures, "This is the most splendid Christmas I ever had since I was born." Then she added with an important air, "Do wish for something else, because I happen to know of 2 more presents outside the door this minute." "Oh me, what richness!" cried Rose, much excited. "I used to wish for a pair of glass slippers like Cinderella's, but as I can't have them, I really don't know what to ask for." Phoebe clapped her hands as she skipped off the bed and ran to the door, saying merrily, "One of them is for your feet anyway. I don't know what you'll say to the other, but I think it's elegant." So did Rose, when a shining pair of skates and a fine sled appeared. "Uncle sent those, I know he did. And now I see them, I remember that I did want to skate and coast. Isn't it a beauty? See, they fit nicely." And sitting on the new sled, Rose tried to skate on her little bare foot, while Phoebe stood by admiring the pretty tableau. "Now we must hurry and get dressed, for there is a deal to do today, and I want to get through in time to try my sled before dinner." "Gracious me! And I ought to be dusting my parlors this blessed minute!" And mistress and maid separated with such happy faces that anyone would have known what day it was without being told.
"Birnam Wood has come to Dunsinane, Rosie," said Dr. Alec as he left the breakfast table to open the door for a procession of holly, hemlock, and cedar boughs that came marching up the steps. Snowballs and Merry Christmases flew about pretty briskly for several minutes. Then all fell to work trimming the old house, for the family always dined together there on that day. "I rode miles and mileses, as Ben says, to get this fine bit, and I'm going to hang it there as the last touch to the rigamoodooning," said Charlie, as he fastened a dull green branch to the chandelier in the front parlor. "It isn't very pretty," said Rose, who was trimming the chimney-piece with glossy holly sprays. "Never mind that, it's mistletoe, and anyone who stands under it will get kissed, whether they like it or not. Now's your time, ladies," answered the saucy prince, keeping his place and looking sentimentally at the girls, who retired precipitately from the dangerous spot. "You won't catch me," said Rose with great dignity. "See if I don't." "I've got my eye on Phoebe," observed Will, in a patronizing tone that made them all laugh. "Bless the dear, I shan't mind it a bit," answered Phoebe, with such a maternal air that Will's budding gallantry was chilled to death. "Oh, the mistletoe bough," sang Rose. "Oh, the mistletoe bough," echoed all the boys, and the teasing ended in the plaintive ballad they all liked so well. There was plenty of time to try the new skates before dinner, and then Rose took her first lesson on the little bay, which seemed to have frozen over for that express purpose.
She found tumbling down and getting up again warm work for a time, but with 6 boys to teach her, she managed at last to stand alone. And, satisfied with that success, she refreshed herself with a dozen grand coasts on the Amazon, as her sled was called. "Ah, that fatal color! It breaks my heart to see it," croaked Aunt Myra, as Rose came down a little late, with cheeks almost as ruddy as the holly berries on the wall, and every curl as smooth as Phoebe's careful hands could make it. "I'm glad to see that Alec allows the poor child to make herself pretty, in spite of his absurd notions," added Aunt Clara, taking infinite satisfaction in the fact that Rose's blue silk dress had 3 frills on it. "She's a very intelligent child, and has a nice little manner of her own," observed Aunt Jane, with unusual affability. For Rose had just handed Mac a screen to guard his eyes from the brilliant fire. "If I had a daughter like that to show my gem when he gets home, I should be a very proud and happy woman," thought Aunt Jessie, and then reproached herself for not being perfectly satisfied with her 4 brave lads. Aunt Plenty was too absorbed in the dinner to have an eye for anything else. If she had not been, she would have seen what an effect her new cap produced upon the boys. The good lady owned that she did love a dressy cap, and on this occasion her headgear was magnificent. For the towering structure of lace was adorned with buff ribbons to such an extent that it looked as if a flock of butterflies had settled on her dear old head. When she trotted about the rooms, the ruches quivered, the little bows all stood erect, and the streamers waved in the breeze so comically that it was absolutely necessary for Archie to smother the crats in the curtains till they had their first laugh out.
Uncle Mac had brought Fun-See to dinner, and it was a mercy he did, for the elder lads found a vent for their merriment in joking the young Chinaman on his improved appearance. He was in American costume now, with a cropped head, and spoke remarkably good English after 6 months at school. But for all that, his yellow face and beady eyes made a curious contrast to the blonde Campbells all about him. Will called him the Typhoon, meaning tycoon,
and the name stuck to him to his great disgust. Aunt Peace was brought down and set in the chair of state at table, for she never failed to join the family on this day, and sat smiling at them all like an embodiment of peace on earth, Uncle Alec said, as he took his place beside her, while Uncle Mac supported Aunt Plenty at the other end. I ate hardly any breakfast, and I've done everything I know to make myself extra hungry, but I really don't think I can eat straight through unless I burst my buttons off, whispered Geordie to Will as he surveyed the bounteous stores before him with a hopeless sigh. A fellow never knows what he can do till he tries, answered Will, attacking his heaped-up plate with an evident intention of doing his duty like a man. Everybody knows what a Christmas dinner is, so we need waste no words in describing this one, but hasten at once to tell what happened at the end of it. The end, by the way, was so long in coming that the gas was lighted before dessert was over, for a snow flurry had come on and the wintry daylight faded fast. But that only made it all the jollier in the warm, bright rooms full of happy souls. Everyone was very merry, but Archie seemed particularly uplifted, so much so that Charlie confided to Rose that he was afraid the chief had been at the decanters.
Rose indignantly denied the insinuation, for when healths were drunk in the good old-fashioned way to suit the elders, she had observed that Aunt Jessie's boys filled their glasses with water and had done the same herself in spite of the prince's jokes about the Rosie. But Archie certainly was unusually excited, and when someone remembered that it was the anniversary of Uncle Jem's wedding and wished he was there to make his speech, his son electrified the family by trying to do it for him. It was rather incoherent and flowery, as maiden speeches are apt to be, but the end was considered superb. For turning to his mother with a queer little choke in his voice, he said that she deserved to be blessed with peace and plenty, to be crowned with roses and lads' love, and to receive the cargo of happiness sailing home to her in spite of wind or tide, to add another gem to the family jewels. That allusion to the captain, now on his return trip, made Mrs. Jessie sob in her napkin and set the boys cheering. Then, as if that was not sensation enough, Archie suddenly dashed out of the room as if he had lost his wits. "Too bashful to stay and be praised," began Charlie, excusing the peculiarities of his chief as in duty bound. "Phoebe beckoned to him. I saw her," cried Rose, staring hard at the door. "Is more presents coming?" asked Jamie, just as his brother reappeared looking more excited than ever. "Yes, a present for Mother, and here it is!" roared Archie, flinging wide the door to let in a tall man who cried out, "Where's my little woman? The first kiss for her, then the rest may come on as fast as they like." Before the words were out of his mouth,
Mrs. Jessie was half hidden under his rough greatcoat, and 4 boys were prancing about him, clamoring for their turn. Of course, there was a joyful tumult for a time, during which Rose slipped into the window recess and watched what went on, as if it were a chapter in a Christmas story. It was good to see bluff Uncle Jem look proudly at his tall son and fondly hug the little ones. It was better still to see him shake his brother's hands as if he would never leave off, and kiss all the sisters in a way that made even solemn Aunt Myra brighten up for a minute. But it was best of all to see him finally established in Grandfather's chair with his little woman beside him, his 3 youngest boys in his lap, and Archie hovering over him like a large-sized cherub. That really was, as Charlie said, a landscape to do one's heart good. "All hearty and all here, thank God," said Captain Jem in the first pause that came, as he looked about him with a grateful face. "All but Rose," answered loyal little Jamie, remembering the absent. "Faith, I forgot the child. Where is George's little girl?" asked the captain, who had not seen her since she was a baby. "You'd better say Alec's great girl," said Uncle Mac, who professed to be madly jealous of his brother. "Here I am, sir,"
and Rose appeared from behind the curtains, looking as if she had rather have stayed there. "St. George Germain, how the mite has grown!" cried Captain Jem, as he tumbled the boys out of his lap and rose to greet the tall girl like a gentleman as he was. But somehow, when he shook her hand, it looked so small in his big one, and her face reminded him so strongly of his dead brother, that he was not satisfied with so cold a welcome, and with a sudden softening of the keen eyes, he took her up in his arms, whispering, with a rough cheek against her smooth one,
God bless you, child. Forgive me if I forgot you for a minute, and be sure that not one of your kinsfolk is happier to see you here than Uncle Jem. That made it all right. And when he set her down, Rose's face was so bright, it was evident that some spell had been used to banish the feeling of neglect that had kept her moping behind the curtains so long. That everyone sat round and heard all about the voyage home, how the captain had set his heart on getting there in time to keep Christmas, how everything had conspired to thwart his plan, and how at the very last minute he had managed to do it, and had sent a telegram to Archie, bidding him keep the secret and be ready for his father at any moment, for the ship got into another port and he might be late. Then Archie told how that telegram had burned in his pocket all dinner time, how he had to take Phoebe into his confidence, and how clever she was to keep the captain back till the speech was over and he could come in with effect. The elders would have sat and talked all the evening, but the young folks were bent on having their usual Christmas frolic. So after an hour of pleasant chat, they began to get restless, and having consulted together in dumb show, they devised a way to very effectually break up the family council. Steve vanished, and sooner than the boys imagined Dandy could get himself up, the skirl of the bagpipe was heard in the hall, and the bonny piper came to lead Clan Campbell to the revel. "Draw it mild, Stevie, my man. You play unco-weel, but you make a most infernal din," cried Uncle Jem,
his hands over his ears, for this accomplishment was new to him and took him all aback as he expressed it. So Steve droned out a Highland reel as softly as he could, and the boys danced it to a circle of admiring relations. Captain Jem was a true sailor, however, and could not stand idle while anything lively was going on. So when the piper's breath gave out, he cut a splendid pigeon wing into the middle of the hall, saying, "Who can dance a fore and after?" and waiting for no reply, began to whistle the air so invitingly that Mrs. Jessie set to him laughing like a girl. Rose and Charlie took their places behind, and away went the four with a spirit and skill that inspired all the rest to cut in as fast as they could. That was a grand beginning, and they had many another dance before anyone would own they were tired. Even Fun C distinguished himself with Aunt Plenty, whom he greatly admired as the stoutest lady in the company, plumpness being considered a beauty in his country. The merry old soul professed herself immensely flattered by his admiration, and the boys declared she set her cap at him, else he would never have dared to catch her under the mistletoe, and rising on the tips of his own toes, gallantly salute her fat cheek. How they all laughed at her astonishment, and how Fun's little black eyes twinkled over this exploit. Charlie put him up to it, and Charlie was so bent on catching Rose that he laid all sorts of pitfalls for her and bribed the other lads to help him. But Rose was wide awake and escaped all his snares, professing great contempt for such foolish customs.
Poor Phoebe did not fare so well, and Archie was the only one who took a base advantage of her as she stood innocently offering tea to Aunt Myra, whom she happened to meet just under the fatal bough. If his father's arrival had not rather upset him, I doubt if the dignified chief would have done it, for he apologized at once in the handsomest manner and caught the tray that nearly dropped from Phoebe's hands. Jamie boldly invited all the ladies to come and salute him, and as for Uncle Jem, he behaved as if the entire room was a grove of mistletoe. Uncle Alec slyly laid a bit of it on Aunt Peace's cap and then softly kissed her, which little joke seemed to please her very much, for she liked to have part in all the home pastimes, and Alec was her favorite nephew. Charlie alone failed to catch his shy bird, and the oftener she escaped, the more determined he was to ensnare her. When every other wile had been tried in vain, he got Archie to propose a game with forfeits. I understand that dodge, thought Rose, and was on her guard so carefully that not one among the pile soon collected belonged to her. Now, let us redeem them and play something else, said Will, quite unconscious of the deeply laid plots all about him. One more round and then we will, answered the prince, who had now baited his trap anew. Just as the question came to Rose, Jamie's voice was heard in the hall, crying distressfully, "Oh, come quick, quick!" Rose started up, missed the question, and was greeted with the general cry of "Forfeit, forfeit!" in which the little traitor came to join. "Now I've got her," thought the young rascal, exulting in his fun-loving soul. "Now I'm lost," thought Rose, as she gave up her pincushion with a sternly defiant look that would have daunted anyone but the reckless prince. In fact, it made even him think twice and resolve to, quote, let Rose off easy, she had been so clever. "Here's a very pretty pawn, and what shall be done to redeem it?" asked Steve, holding the pincushion over Charlie's head, for he had insisted on being judge and kept that for the last. "Fine or superfine?" "Super." Well, she shall take old Mac under the mistletoe and kiss him prettily. Won't he be mad, though?" And this bad boy chuckled over the discomfort he had caused two harmless beings. There was an impressive pause among the young folks in their corner, for they all knew that Mac would be mad, since he hated nonsense of this sort and had gone to talk with the elders when the game began. At this moment he was standing before the fire, listening to a discussion between his uncles and his father, looking as wise as a young owl and blissfully unconscious of the plots against him. Charlie expected that Rose would say, "I won't." Therefore, he was rather astonished, not to say gratified, when, after a look at the victim, she laughed suddenly, and going up to the group of gentlemen, drew her Uncle Mac under the mistletoe and surprised him with a hearty kiss. "Thank you, my dear," said the innocent gentleman, looking much pleased at the unexpected honor. "Oh, come, that's not fair," began Charlie, but Rose cut him short by saying, as she made him a fine curtsy, "You said old Mac, and though it was very disrespectful, I did it. That was your last chance, sir, and you've lost it." He certainly had, for as he spoke, Rose pulled down the mistletoe and threw it into the fire, while the boys jeered at the crestfallen prince and exalted quick-witted Rose to the skies. "What's the joke?" asked young Mac, waked out of a brown study by the laughter, in which the elders joined. But there was a regular shout when, the matter having been explained to him, Mac took a meditative stare at Rose through his goggles and said in a philosophical tone, "Well, I don't think I should have minded much if she had done it." That tickled the lads immensely, and nothing but the appearance of a slight refection would have induced them to stop chaffing the poor worm, who could not see anything funny in the beautiful resignation he had shown on this trying occasion. Soon after this, the discovery of Jamie curled up in the sofa corner, as sound asleep as a dormouse, suggested the propriety of going home, and a general move was made. They were all standing about the hall, lingering over the good nights, when the sound of a voice softly singing "Sweet Home" made them pause and listen. It was Phoebe.
Poor little Phoebe, who never had a home, never knew the love of father or mother, brother or sister, who stood all alone in the wide world, yet was not sad nor afraid, but took her bits of happiness gratefully and sung over her work without a thought of discontent. I fancy the happy family standing there together remembered this and felt the beauty of it.
For when the solitary voice came to the burden of its song, other voices took it up and finished it so sweetly that the old house seemed to echo the word home in the ears of both the orphan girls, who had just spent their first Christmas under its hospitable roof. Chapter 21. A Scare. "Brother Alec, you surely don't mean to allow that child to go out such a bitter cold day as this," said Mrs. Myra, looking into the study where the doctor sat reading his paper one February morning. "Why not? If a delicate invalid like yourself can bear it, surely my hardy girl can, especially as she is dressed for cold weather," answered Dr. Alec with provoking confidence. "But you have no idea how sharp the wind is. I am chilled to the very marrow of my bones," answered Aunt Myra, chafing the end of her purple nose with her somber glove. "I don't doubt it, ma'am, if you will wear crepe and silk instead of fur and flannel. Rosie goes out in all weathers, and will be none the worse for an hour's brisk skating." "Well, I warn you that you are trifling with the child's health and depending too much on the seeming improvement she has made this year. She is a delicate creature for all that, and will drop away suddenly at the first serious attack, as her poor mother did," croaked Aunt Myra with a despondent wag of the big bonnet. "I'll risk it," answered Dr. Alec, knitting his brows, as he always did when any allusion was made to that other Rose. "Mark my words, you will repent it." And with that awful prophecy, Aunt Myra departed like a black shadow. Now it must be confessed that among the doctor's failings, and he had his share, was a very masculine dislike of advice which was thrust upon him unasked. He always listened with respect to the great-aunts, and often consulted Mrs. Jessie. But the other three ladies tried his patience sorely by constant warnings, complaints, and counsels. Aunt Myra was an especial trial, and he always turned contrary the moment she began to talk. He could not help it, and often laughed about it with comic frankness. Here now was a sample of it, for he had just been thinking that Rose had better defer her run till the wind went down and the sun was warmer. But Aunt Myra spoke, and he could not resist the temptation to make light of her advice and let Rose brave the cold. He had no fear of its harming her, for she went out every day, and it was a great satisfaction to him to see her run down the avenue a minute afterward, with her skates on her arm, looking like a rosy-faced Eskimo in her sealskin suit, as she smiled at Aunt Myra, stalking along as solemnly as a crow. "I hope the child won't stay out long, for this wind is enough to chill the marrow in younger bones than Myra's," thought Dr. Alec half an hour later, as he drove toward the city to see the few patients he had consented to take for old acquaintance' sake. The thought returned several times that morning, for it was truly a bitter day, and in spite of his bearskin coat, the doctor shivered. But he had great faith in Rose's good sense, and it never occurred to him that she was making a little Casablanca of herself, with the difference of freezing instead of burning at her post. You see, Mac had made an appointment to meet her at a certain spot and have a grand skating bout as soon as the few lessons he was allowed were over. She had promised to wait for him, and did so with a faithfulness that cost her dear, because Mac forgot his appointment when the lessons were done, and became absorbed in a chemical experiment till a general combustion of gases drove him out of his laboratory. Then he suddenly remembered Rose and would gladly have hurried away to her, but his mother forbade his going out, for the sharp wind would hurt his eyes. "She will wait and wait, Mother, for she always keeps her word, and I told her to hold on till I came," explained Mac, with visions of a shivering little figure watching on the windy hilltop.
Of course your uncle won't let her go out such a day as this. If he does, she will have the sense to come here for you, or to go home again when you don't appear," said Aunt Jane, returning to her what's on the mind. "I wish Steve would just cut up and see if she's there, since I can't go," began Mac anxiously. "Steve won't stir a peg, thank you. He's got his own toes to thaw out and wants his dinner," answered Dandy. "Just in from school and wrestling impatiently with his boots." So Mac resigned himself, and Rose waited dutifully till dinner time assured her that her waiting was in vain. She had done her best to keep warm, had skated till she was tired and hot, then stood watching others till she was chilled, tried to get up a glow again by trotting up and down the road but failed to do so, and finally cuddled disconsolately under a pine tree to wait and watch. When she at length started for home, she was benumbed with cold and could hardly make her way against the wind that buffeted the rose-bitten Rose most unmercifully. Dr. Alec was basking in the warmth of the study fire after his drive when the sound of a stifled sob made him hurry to the door and look anxiously into the hall.
Rose lay in a shivering bunch near the register, with her things half off, wringing her hands and trying not to cry with the pain-returning warmth brought to her half-frozen fingers. "My darling, what is it?" And Uncle Alec had her in his arms in a minute. "Mac didn't come. I can't get warm. The fire makes me ache." And with a long shiver, Rose burst out crying, while her teeth chattered and her poor little nose was so blue it made one's heart ache to see it. In less time than it takes to tell it, Dr. Alec had her on the sofa, rolled up in the bearskin coat, with Phoebe rubbing her cold feet while he rubbed the aching hands, and Aunt Plenty made a comfortable hot drink, and Aunt Peace sent down her own foot warmer, an embroidered blanket, for the dear. Full of remorseful tenderness, Uncle Alec worked over his new patient till she declared she was all right again. He would not let her get up to dinner, but fed her himself, and then forgot his own while he sat watching her fall into a drowse, for Aunt Plenty's cordial made her sleepy. She lay so several hours, for the drowse deepened into a heavy sleep, and Uncle Alec, still at his post, saw with growing anxiety that a feverish color began to burn in her cheeks, that her breathing was quick and uneven, and now and then she gave a little moan as if in pain. Suddenly she woke up with a start, and seeing Aunt Plenty bending over her, put out her arms like a sick child, saying wearily, "Please, could I go to bed?" "The best place for you, dearie. Take her right up, Alec. I've got the hot water ready, and after a nice bath, she shall have a cup of my sage tea, and be rolled up in blankets to sleep off her cold," answered the old lady cheerily, as she bustled away to give orders. "Are you in pain, darling?" asked Uncle Alec as he carried her up. "My side aches when I breathe, and I feel stiff and queer, but it isn't bad, so don't be troubled, Uncle," whispered Rose, with a little hot hand against his cheek. But the poor doctor did look troubled, and had cause to do so, for just then Rose tried to laugh at Dolly charging into the room with a warming pan, but could not, for the sharp pain took her breath away and made her cry out. "Pleurisy," sighed Aunt Plenty from the depths of the bathtub. "Pneumonia," groaned Dolly, burrowing among the bedclothes with the long-handled pan, as if bent on fishing up that treacherous disease. "Oh, is it bad?" asked Phoebe, nearly dropping a pail of hot water in her dismay, for she knew nothing of sickness, and Dolly's suggestion had a peculiarly dreadful sound to her. "Hush," ordered the doctor, in a tone that silenced all further predictions and made everyone work with a will. "Make her as comfortable as you can, and when she is in her little bed, I'll come and say good night," he added, when the bath was ready and the blankets browning nicely before the fire. Then he went away to talk quite cheerfully to Aunt Peace about it being only a chill,
after which he tramped up and down the hall, pulling his beard and knitting his brows, sure signs of great inward perturbation. I thought it would be too good luck to get through the year without a downfall. Confound my perversity. Why couldn't I take Myra's advice and keep Rose at home? It's not fair that the poor child should suffer for my sinful overconfidence. She shall not suffer for it. Pneumonia, indeed. I defy it.
And he shook his fist in the ugly face of an Indian idol that happened to be before him, as if that particularly hideous god had some spite against his own little goddess. In spite of his defiance, his heart sunk when he saw Rose again, for the pain was worse, and the bath and blankets, the warming pan and piping hot sage tea were all in vain. For several hours there was no rest for the poor child, and all manner of gloomy forebodings haunted the minds of those who hovered about her, with faces full of the tenderest anxiety. In the midst of the worst paroxysm, Charlie came to leave a message from his mother, and was met by Phoebe coming despondently downstairs with a mustard plaster that had brought no relief. "What the dickens is the matter? You look as dismal as a tombstone," he said as she held up her hand to stop his lively whistling. "Miss Rose is dreadful sick. The deuce she is." "Don't swear, Mr. Charlie. She really is, and it's Mr. Mac's fault." And Phoebe told the sad tale in a few sharp words, for she felt at war with the entire race of boys at that moment. "I'll give it to him. Make your mind easy about that," said Charlie, with an ominous doubling up of his fist. "But Rose isn't dangerously ill, is she?" he added anxiously, as Aunt Plenty was seen to trot across the upper hall, shaking a bottle violently as she went. "Oh, but she is, though. The doctor don't say much, but he don't call it a chill anymore. It's pleurisy now, and I'm so afraid it will be pneumonia tomorrow," answered Phoebe, with a despairing glance at the plaster. Charlie exploded into a stifled laugh at the new pronunciation of pneumonia, to Phoebe's great indignation.
"How can you have the heart to do it, and she in such horrid pain? Hark to that, and then laugh if you darest," she said with a tragic gesture, and her black eyes full of fire. Charlie listened and heard little moans that went to his heart and made his face as sober as Phoebe's. "Oh, Uncle, please stop the pain and let me rest a minute. Don't tell the boys I wasn't brave. I try to bear it, but it's so sharp I can't help crying." Neither could Charlie when he heard the broken voice say that, but, boy-like, he wouldn't own it and said pettishly as he rubbed his sleeve across his eyes, "Don't hold that confounded thing right under my nose. The mustard makes my eyes smart." "Don't see how it can when it hasn't any more strength in it than meal. The doctor said so, and I'm going to get some better," began Phoebe, not a bit ashamed of the great tears that were bedewing the condemned plaster. "I'll go," and Charlie was off like a shot, glad of an excuse to get out of sight for a few minutes. When he came back, all inconvenient emotion had been disposed of, and having delivered a box of the hottest mustard procurable for money, he departed to blow up Mac, that being his next duty, in his opinion. He did it so energetically and thoroughly that the poor worm was cast into the depths of remorseful despair, and went to bed that evening feeling that he was an outcast from among men, and bore the mark of Cain on his brow. Thanks to the skill of the doctor and the devotion of his helpers, Rose grew easier about midnight, and all hoped that the worst was over. Phoebe was making tea by the study fire, for the doctor had forgotten to eat and drink since Rose was ill, and Aunt Plenty insisted on him having a good cordial dish of tea after his exertions.
A tap on the window startled Phoebe, and looking up, she saw a face peering in. She was not afraid, for a second look showed her that it was neither ghost nor burglar, but Mac, looking pale and wild in the wintry moonlight. "Come and let a fellow in," he said in a low tone, and when he stood in the hall, he clutched Phoebe's arm, whispering gruffly, "How is Rose?" "Thanks be to goodness she's better," answered Phoebe with a smile that was like broad sunshine to the poor lad's anxious heart. "And she will be all right again tomorrow?" "Oh dear, no. Dolly says she's sure to have rheumatic fever if she don't have pneumonia," answered Phoebe, careful to pronounce the word rightly this time.
Down went Mac's face, and remorse began to gnaw at him again as he gave a great sigh and said doubtfully, "I suppose I couldn't see her." "Of course not at this time of night when we want her to go to sleep." Mac opened his mouth to say something more when a sneeze came upon him unawares, and a loud "Arash ho!" awoke the echoes of the quiet house. "Why didn't you stop it?" said Phoebe reproachfully. "I dare say you've waked her up." "I didn't know it was coming. Just my luck," groaned Mac, turning to go before his unfortunate presence did more harm. But a voice from the stairhead called softly, "Mac, come up. Rose wants to see you." Up he went and found his uncle waiting for him. "What brings you here at this hour, my boy?" asked the doctor in a whisper. "Charlie said it was all my fault, and if she died, I'd killed her. I couldn't sleep, so I came to see how she was, and no one knows it but Steve," he said with such a troubled face and voice that the doctor had not the heart to blame him.
Before he could say anything more, a feeble voice called, "Mac!" and with a hasty, "Stay a minute, just to please her, and then slip away, for I want her to sleep," the doctor led him into the room. The face on the pillow looked very pale and childish, and the smile that welcomed Mac was very faint, for Rose was spent with pain, yet could not rest till she had said a word of comfort to her cousin. "I knew your funny sneeze, and I guessed that you came to see how I did, though it is very late. Don't be worried. I'm better now, and it is my fault I was ill, not yours, for I needn't have been so silly as to wait in the cold just because I said I would." Mac hastened to explain, to load himself with reproaches, and to beg her not to die on any account, for Charlie's lecture had made a deep impression on the poor boy's mind. "I didn't know there was any danger of my dying," and Rose looked up at him with a solemn expression in her great eyes. "Oh, I hope not, but people do sometimes go suddenly, you know, and I couldn't rest till I'd asked you to forgive me," faltered Mac, thinking that Rose looked very like an angel already, with the golden hair loose on the pillow and the meekness of suffering on her little white face. "I don't think I shall die. Uncle won't let me. But if I do, remember I forgave you." She looked at him with a tender light in her eyes, and seeing how pathetic his dumb grief was, she added softly, drawing his head down, "I wouldn't kiss you under the mistletoe, but I will now, for I want you to be sure I do forgive and love you just the same." That quite upset poor Mac. He could only murmur his thanks and get out of the room as fast as possible to grope his way to the couch at the far end of the hall and lie there till he fell asleep worn out from trying not to make a baby of himself. Chapter 22. Something to Do. Whatever danger there might have been from the effects of that sudden chill, it was soon over, though of course Aunt Myra refused to believe it, and Dr. Alec cherished her girl with redoubled vigilance and tenderness for months afterward. Rose quite enjoyed being sick, because as soon as the pain ended, the fun began, and for a week or two she led the life of a little princess secluded in the bower, while everyone served, amused, and watched over her in the most delightful manner. But the doctor was called away to see an old friend who was dangerously ill, and then Rose felt like a young bird deprived of its mother's sheltering wing, especially on one afternoon when the aunts were taking their naps, and the house was very still within, while snow fell softly without. "I'll go and hunt up Phoebe. She is always nice and busy, and likes to have me help her. If Dolly is out of the way, we can make caramels and surprise the boys when they come," Rose said to herself, as she threw down her book and felt ready for society of some sort. She took the precaution to peep through the slide before she entered the kitchen, for Dolly allowed no messing when she was round. But the coast was clear,
and no one but Phoebe appeared, sitting at the table with her head on her arms, apparently asleep. Rose was just about to wake her with a boo when she lifted her head, dry her wet eyes with her blue apron, and fell to work with a resolute face on something she was evidently much interested in. Rose could not make out what it was, and her curiosity was greatly excited, for Phoebe was writing with a sputtering pen on some bits of brown paper, apparently copying something from a little book.
I must know what the dear thing is about, and why she cried and then set her lips tight and went to work with all her might, thought Rose, forgetting all about the caramels, and going around to the door, she entered the kitchen, saying pleasantly, "Phoebe, I want something to do. Can't you let me help you about anything, or shall I be in the way?" "Oh, dear no, miss. I always love to have you round when things are tidy. What would you like to do?" answered Phoebe, opening a drawer as if about to sweep her own affairs out of sight. But Rose stopped her, exclaiming, like a curious child, "Let me see. What is it? I won't tell if you'd rather not have Dolly know." "I'm only trying to study a bit, but I'm so stupid I don't get on much," answered the girl reluctantly, permitting her little mistress to examine the poor contrivances she was trying to work with. A broken slate that had blown off the roof, an inch or two of pencil, an old almanac for a reader, several bits of brown or yellow paper ironed smoothly and sewn together for a copybook, and the copies sundry receipts written in Aunt Plenty's neat hand. These, with a small bottle of ink and a rusty pen, made up Phoebe's outfit, and it was little wonder that she did not get on, in spite of the patient persistence that dried the desponding tears and drove along the sputtering pen with a will. "You may laugh if you want to, Miss Rose. I know my things are cure, and that's why I hide 'em, but I don't mind since you found me out, and I ain't a bit ashamed except for being so backward at my age," said Phoebe humbly, though her cheeks grew redder as she washed out some crooked capitals with a tear or two not yet dried on the slate.
Laugh at you? I feel more like crying to think what a selfish girl I am, to have loads of books and things and never remember to give you some. Why didn't you come and ask me and not go struggling along alone in this way? It was very wrong of you, Phoebe, and I'll never forgive you if you do so again," answered Rose with one hand on Phoebe's shoulder while the other gently turned the leaves of the poor little copybook. "I didn't like to ask for anything more when you are so good to me all the time, Miss dear," began Phoebe, looking up with grateful eyes. "Oh, you proud thing, just as if it wasn't fun to give away, and I had the best of it. Now, see here, I've got a plan, and you mustn't say no, or I shall scold. I want something to do, and I'm going to teach you all I know. It won't take long." And Rose laughed as she put her arm around Phoebe's neck and patted the smooth, dark head with the kind little hand that so loved to give. "It would be just heavenly," and Phoebe's face shone at the mere idea, but fell again as she added wistfully, "Only I'm afraid I ought not to let you do it, Miss Rose. It will take time, and maybe the doctor wouldn't like it. He didn't want me to study much, but he never said a word about teaching, and I don't believe he will mind a bit. Anyway, we can try it till he comes, so pack up your things and go right to my room, and we'll begin this very day. I'd truly like to do it, and we'll have nice times. See if we don't," cried Rose eagerly. It was a pretty sight to see Phoebe bundle her humble outfit into her apron and spring up as if the desire of her heart had suddenly been made a happy fact to her. It was a still prettier sight to see Rose run gaily on before, smiling like a good fairy as she beckoned to the other, singing as she went,
"The way into my parlor is up a winding stair, and many other curious things I'll show you when you're there. Will you walk in, Phoebe dear?" "Oh, won't I?" answered Phoebe fervently, adding as they entered the bower, "You are the dearest spider that ever was, and I'm the happiest fly. I'm going to be very strict, so sit down in that chair and don't say a word till school is ready to open, ordered Rose, delighted with the prospect of such a useful and pleasant something to do. So Phoebe sat demurely in her place, while her new teacher laid forth books and slates, a pretty inkstand, and a little globe, hastily tore off a bit of her big sponge, sharpened pencils with more energy than skill, and when all was ready, gave a prance of satisfaction that set the pupil laughing. "Now the school is open, and I shall hear you read so that I may know in which class to put you, Miss Moore," began Rose with great dignity as she laid a book before her scholar and sat down in the easy chair with a long rule in her hand. Phoebe did pretty well, only tripping now and then over a hard word and pronouncing identical, "I-dinkle," in a sober way that tickled Rose, though never a smile betrayed her. The spelling lesson which followed was rather discouraging. Phoebe's ideas of geography were very vague, and grammar was nowhere, though the pupil protested that she tried so hard to talk nice like educated folks that Dolly called her a stuck-up piece who didn't know her place. Dolly's an old goose, so don't you mind her, for she will say nater, victuals, and dues as long as she lives, and insist that they are right.
You do talk very nicely, Phoebe. I've observed it. And grammar will help you, and show you some things are right, and others are not, added Rose, correcting herself, and feeling that she must mind her own parts of speech, if she was to serve as an example for Phoebe. When the arithmetic came, the little teacher was surprised to find her scholar quicker in some things than herself, for Phoebe had worked away at the columns in the butcher's and baker's books till she could add so quickly and correctly that Rose was amazed, and felt that in this branch the pupil would soon excel the teacher if she kept on at the same pace. Her praise cheered Phoebe immensely, and they went bravely on, both getting so interested that time flew unheeded, till Aunt Plenty appeared, exclaiming, as she stared at the two heads bent over one slate, "Bless my heart, what is going on now?" "School, Auntie. I'm teaching Phoebe, and it's great fun," cried Rose, looking up with a bright face. But Phoebe's was brighter, though she added with a wistful look, "Maybe I ought to have asked leave first? Only when Miss Rose proposed this, I was so happy I forgot to. Shall I stop, ma'am?" "Of course not, child. I'm glad to see you fond of your book, and to find Rose helping you along. My blessed mother used to sit at work with her maids about her, teaching them many a useful thing in the good old fashion that's gone by now. Only don't neglect your work, dear, or let the books interfere with duties." As Aunt Plenty spoke, with her kind old face beaming approvingly upon the girls, Phoebe glanced at the clock, saw that it pointed to 5, knew that Dolly would soon be down, expecting to find preparations for supper underway, and, hastily dropping her pencil, she jumped up saying,
"Please, can I go? I'll clear up after I've done my chores." "School is dismissed," answered Rose, and with a grateful, "Thank you heaps and heaps," Phoebe ran away singing the multiplication table as she set the tea ditto. That was the way it began, and for a week the class of 1 went on with great pleasure and profit to all concerned, for the pupil proved a bright one and came to her lessons as to a feast, while the young teacher did her best to be worthy the high opinion held of her, for Phoebe firmly believed that Miss Rose knew everything in the way of learning. Of course, the lads found out what was going on and chaffed the girls about the seminary, as they called the new enterprise, but they thought it a good thing on the whole, kindly offered to give lessons in Greek and Latin gratis, and decided among themselves that Rose was a little trump to give the Phoebe bird such a capital boost. Rose herself had some doubts as to how it would strike her uncle, and concocted a wheedlesome speech which should at once convince him that it was the most useful, wholesome, and delightful plan ever devised. But she got no chance to deliver her address, for Dr. Alec came upon her so unexpectedly that it went out of her head entirely.
She was sitting on the floor in the library, poring over a big book laid open in her lap, and knew nothing of the long-desired arrival till two large, warm hands met under her chin and gently turned her head back, so that someone could kiss her heartily on either cheek while a fatherly voice said, half reproachfully, "Why is my girl brooding over a dusty encyclopedia when she ought to be running to meet the old gentleman who couldn't get on another minute without her?"
Oh, Uncle, I'm so glad and so sorry. Why didn't you let us know what time you'd be here or call out the minute you came? Haven't I been homesick for you? And now I'm so happy to have you back, I could hug your dear old curly head off, cried Rose, as the encyclopedia went down with a bang and she up with a spring that carried her into Dr. Alec's arms, to be kept there in the sort of embrace a man gives to the dearest creature the world holds for him. Presently, he was in his easy chair with Rose upon his knee, smiling up in his face and talking as fast as her tongue could go, while he watched her with an expression of supreme content as he stroked the smooth, round cheek or held the little hand in his, rejoicing to see how rosy was the one, how plump and strong the other. "Have you had a good time? Did you save the poor lady? Aren't you glad to be home again with your girl to torment you?" "Yes, to all those questions. Now tell me what you've been at, little sinner. Auntie Plen says you want to consult me about some new and remarkable project which you have dared to start in my absence. She didn't tell you, I hope?" "Not a word more, except that you were rather doubtful how I take it, and so wanted to fess yourself and get round me as you always try to do, though you don't often succeed. Now then, own up and take the consequences." So Rose told about her school in her pretty, earnest way, dwelling on Phoebe's hunger for knowledge and the delight it was to help her, adding with a wise nod, "And it helps me too, Uncle, for she is so quick and eager, I have to do my best or she will get ahead of me in some things." Today now, she had the word cotton in a lesson and asked all about it, and I was ashamed to find I really knew so little that I could only say that it was a plant that grew down south in a kind of a pod and was made into cloth. That's what I was reading up when you came, and tomorrow I shall tell her all about it, and indigo too. So you see, it teaches me also, and is as good as a general review of what I've learned, in a pleasanter way than going over it alone. You artful little baggage, that's the way you expect to get round me, is it? That's not studying, I suppose. No, sir, it's teaching, and please, I like it much better than having a good time by myself. Besides, you know, I adopted Phoebe and promised to be a sister to her, so I am bound to keep my word, am I not?" answered Rose, looking both anxious and resolute as she waited for her sentence. Dr. Alec was evidently already won, for Rose had described the old slate and brown paper copybook with pathetic effect, and the excellent man had not only decided to send Phoebe to school long before the story was done, but reproached himself for forgetting his duty to one little girl in his love for another. So when Rose tried to look meek and failed utterly, he laughed and pinched her cheek and answered in that genial way which adds such warmth and grace to any favor. "I haven't the slightest objection in the world. In fact, I was beginning to think I might let you go at your books again, moderately, since you are so well, and this is an excellent way to try your powers. Phoebe is a brave, bright lass, and shall have a fair chance in the world, if we can give it to her, so that if she ever finds her friends, they need not be ashamed of her." "I think she has found some already," began Rose eagerly. "Hey? What? Has anyone turned up since I've been gone?" asked Dr. Alec quickly, for it was a firm belief in the family that Phoebe would prove to be somebody sooner or later. "No, her best friend turned up when you came home, Uncle," answered Rose with an approving pat, adding gratefully, "I can't half thank you for being so good to my girl, but she will, because I know she is going to make a woman to be proud of. She's so strong and true and loving." "Bless your dear heart, I haven't begun to do anything yet. More shame to me.
But I'm going at it now, and as soon as she gets on a bit, she shall go to school as long as she likes. How will that do for a beginning?" "It will be just heavenly," as Phoebe says, "for it is the wish of her life to get lots of schooling, and she will be too happy when I tell her. May I, please? It will be so lovely to see the dear thing open her big eyes and clap her hands at the splendid news." "No one shall have a finger in this nice little pie. You shall do it all yourself. Only don't go too fast or make too many castles in the air, my dear, for time and patience must go into this pie of ours if it is to turn out well." "Yes, Uncle, only when it is opened, won't the birds begin to sing?" laughed Rose, taking a turn about the room as a vent for the joyful emotions that made her eyes shine. All of a sudden, she stopped and asked soberly, "If Phoebe goes to school, who will do her work? I'm willing, if I can." "Come here and I'll tell you a secret. Dolly's bones are getting so troublesome and her dear old temper so bad that the aunts have decided to pension her off and let her go and live with her daughter, who has married very well. I saw her this week, and she'd like to have her mother come, so in the spring we shall have a grand change. And get a new cook and chamber girl, if any can be found, to suit our honored relatives." "Oh me, how can I ever get on without Phoebe? Couldn't she stay, just so I could see her? I'd pay her board rather than have her go. I'm so fond of her." How Dr. Alec laughed at that proposal, and how satisfied Rose was when he explained that Phoebe was still to be her maid, with no duties except such as she could easily perform between school hours. She is a proud creature for all her humble ways, and even from us would not take a favor if she did not earn it somewhere. So this arrangement makes it all square and comfortable, you see, and she will pay for the schooling by curling these gold locks a dozen times a day if you let her. Your plans are always so wise and kind. That's why they work so well, I suppose, and why people let you do what you like with them. I really don't see how other girls get along without an Uncle Alec," answered Rose, with a sigh of pity for those who had missed so great a blessing. When Phoebe was told the splendid news, she did not stand on her head with rapture, as Charlie prophesied she would, but took it quietly, because it was such a happy thing she had no words big and beautiful enough to thank them in, she said. But every hour of her day was brightened by this granted wish, and dedicated to the service of those who gave it. Her heart was so full of content that it overflowed in music, and the sweet voice singing all about the house gave thanks so blithely that no other words were needed. Her willing feet were never tired of taking steps for those who had smoothed her way. Her skillful hands were always busy in some labor of love for them. And on the face, fast growing in comeliness, there was an almost womanly expression of devotion, which proved how well Phoebe had already learned one of life's great lessons, gratitude. Chapter 23. Peacemaking. "Steve, I want you to tell me something," said Rose to Dandy, who was making faces at himself in the glass while he waited for an answer to the note he brought from his mother to Aunt Plenty. "P'raps I will, and p'raps I won't. What is it?" "Haven't Arch and Charlie quarreled?" "Dare say. We fellows are always having little rows, you know. I do believe a sty is coming on my starboard eye." And Steve affected to be absorbed in a survey of his yellow lashes. "No, that won't do. I want to know all about it, for I'm sure something more serious than a little row is the matter. Come, please tell me, Stenny, there's a dear." "Botheration! You don't want me to turn tay-tail, do you?" growled Steve, pulling his topknot, as he always did when perplexed. "Yes, I do," was Rose's decided answer, for she saw from his manner that she was right, and determined to have the secret out of him if coaxing would do it. "I don't wish you to tell things to everyone, of course, but to me you may, and you must, because I have a right to know. You boys need somebody to look after you, and I'm going to do it, for girls are nice peacemakers and know how to manage people. Uncle said so, and he is never wrong." Steve was about to indulge in a derisive hoot at the idea of her looking after them, but a sudden thought restrained him and suggested a way in which he could satisfy Rose and better himself at the same time. "What will you give me if I'll tell you every bit about it?" he asked.
With a sudden red in his cheeks and an uneasy look in his eyes, for he was half ashamed of the proposition. "What do you want?" And Rose looked up, rather surprised at his question. "I'd like to borrow some money. I shouldn't think of asking you, only Mac never has a cent, since he's set up his old chemical shop, where he'll blow himself to bits someday, and you and Uncle will have the fun of putting him together again." And Steve tried to look as if the idea amused him. "I'll lend it to you with pleasure," said Rose, bound to get at the secret. Evidently much relieved by the promise, Steve set his top knot cheerfully erect again and briefly stated the case. "As you say, it's all right to tell you, but don't let the boys know I blabbed, or Prince will take my head off. You see, Archie don't like some of the fellows Charlie goes with, and cuts 'em. That makes Prince mad, and he holds on just to plague Arch, so they don't speak to one another, if they can help it, and that's the row." "Are those boys bad?" asked Rose anxiously. "Guess not, only rather wild. They are older than our fellows, but they like Prince. He's such a jolly boy, sings so well, dances jigs and breakdowns, you know, and plays any game that's going. He beat Morse at billiards, and that's something to brag of, for Morse thinks he knows everything. I saw the match, and it was great fun." Steve got quite excited over the prowess of Charlie, whom he admired immensely and tried to imitate. Rose did not know half the danger of such gifts and tastes as Charlie's, but felt instinctively that something must be wrong if Archie disapproved. "If Prince likes any billiard-playing boy better than Archie, I don't think much of his sense," she said severely. "Of course he doesn't. But you see, Charlie and Arch are both as proud as they can be and won't give in. I suppose Arch is right, but I don't blame Charlie a bit for liking to be with the others sometimes. They are such a jolly set." And Steve shook his head morally, even while his eye twinkled over the memory of some of the exploits of the jolly set. "Oh, dear me," sighed Rose. "I don't see what I can do about it, but I wish the boys would make up, for Prince can't come to any harm with Archie. He's so good and sensible." "That's the trouble. Arch preaches, and Prince won't stand it. He told Arch he was a prig and a parson, and Arch told him he wasn't a gentleman. My boots, weren't they both mad, though? I thought for a minute they'd pitch into one another and have it out. Wish they had, and not gone stalking round stiff and glum ever since. Mac and I settle our Rose with a bat or so over the head, and then we are all right." Rose couldn't help laughing as Steve sparred away at a fat sofa pillow to illustrate his meaning, and, having given it several scientific whacks, he pulled down his cuffs and smiled upon her with benign pity for her feminine ignorance of this summary way of settling a quarrel. "What droll things boys are," she said, with a mixture of admiration and perplexity in her face, which Steve accepted as a compliment to his sex. "We're a pretty clever invention, miss, and you can't get on without us," he answered with his nose in the air. Then, taking a sudden plunge into business, he added, "How about that bit of money you were going to lend me? I've told, now you pay up." "Of course I will. How much do you want?" And Rose pulled out her purse. "Could you spare $5? I want to pay a little debt of honor that is rather pressing," and Steve put on a mannish air that was comical to see. "Aren't all debts honorable?" asked innocent Rose. "Yes, of course, but this is a bet I made, and it ought to be settled up at once," began Steve, finding it awkward to explain. "Oh, don't bet. It's not right, and I know your father wouldn't like it. Promise you won't do so again. Please promise."
and Rose held fast the hand into which she had just put the money. "Well, I won't. It's worried me a good deal, but I was joked into it. Much obliged, cousin. I'm all right now." And Steve departed hastily. Having decided to be a peacemaker, Rose waited for an opportunity, and very soon it came. She was spending the day with Aunt Clara, who had been entertaining some young guests, and invited Rose to meet them, for she thought it high time her niece conquered her bashfulness and saw a little of society. Dinner was over, and everyone had gone. Aunt Clara was resting before going out to an evening party, and Rose was waiting for Charlie to come and take her home. She sat alone in the elegant drawing room, feeling particularly nice and pretty, for she had her best frock on, a pair of gold bands her aunt had just given her, and a tea rosebud in her sash, like the beautiful Miss Van Tassel, whom everyone admired. She had spread out her little skirts to the best advantage, and, leaning back in a luxurious chair, sat admiring her own feet in new slippers with rosettes almost as big as Dahlia's. Presently, Charlie came lounging in, looking rather sleepy and queer, Rose thought. On seeing her, however, he roused up and said with a smile that ended in a gape, "I thought you were with Mother, so I took 40 winks after I got those girls off. Now I'm at your service, Rosamunda, whenever you like." "You look as if your head ached. If it does, don't mind me. I'm not afraid to run home alone. It's so early," answered Rose, observing the flushed cheeks and heavy eyes of her cousin. "I think I see myself letting you do it. Champagne always makes my head ache, but the air will set me up." "Why do you drink it then?" asked Rose anxiously. "Can't help it when I'm host. Now, don't you begin to lecture. I've had enough of Archie's old-fashioned notions, and I don't want any more." Charlie's tone was decidedly cross, and his whole manner so unlike his usual merry good nature that Rose felt crushed and answered meekly, "I wasn't going to lecture, only when people like other people, they can't bear to see them suffer pain." That brought Charlie round at once, for Rose's lips trembled a little, though she tried to hide it by smelling the flower she pulled from her sash. "I'm a regular bear, and I beg your pardon for being so cross, Rosie," he said, in the old frank way that was so winning. "I wish you'd beg Archie's too, and be good friends again. You never were cross when he was your chum," Rose said, looking up at him as he bent toward her from the low chimney-piece where he had been leaning his elbows. In an instant, he stood as stiff and straight as a ramrod, and the heavy eyes kindled with an angry spark as he said, in his high and mighty manner, "You'd better not meddle with what you don't understand, cousin." "But I do understand, and it troubles me very much to see you so cold and stiff to one another. You always used to be together, and now you hardly speak. You are so ready to beg my pardon, I don't see why you can't beg Archie's if you are in the wrong." "I'm not." This was so short and sharp that Rose started, and Charlie added in a calmer but still very haughty tone, "A gentleman always begs pardon when he has been rude to a lady, but one man doesn't apologize to another man who has insulted him." "Oh, my heart, what a pepper pot," thought Rose, and, hoping to make him laugh, she added slyly, "I was not talking about men, but boys, and one of them a prince, who ought to set a good example to his subjects." But Charlie would not relent, and tried to turn the subject by saying gravely, as he unfastened a little gold ring from his watch-guard, "I've broken my word, so I want to give this back and free you from the bargain. I'm sorry, but I think it a foolish promise, and don't intend to keep it. Choose a pair of earrings to suit yourself as my forfeit. You have a right to wear them now." "No, I can only wear one, and that is no use, for Archie will keep his word, I'm sure." Rose was so mortified and grieved at this downfall of her hopes that she spoke sharply and would not take the ring the deserter offered her.
He shrugged his shoulders and threw it into her lap, trying to look cool and careless, but failing entirely, for he was ashamed of himself and out of sorts generally. Rose wanted to cry, but pride would not let her, and, being very angry, she relieved herself by talk instead of tears. Looking pale and excited, she rose out of her chair, cast away the ring, and said in a voice that she vainly tried to keep steady, "You are not at all the boy I thought you were, and I don't respect you one bit. I've tried to help you be good, but you won't let me, and I shall not try any more. You talk a great deal about being a gentleman, but you are not, for you've broken your word, and I can never trust you again. I don't wish you to go home with me. I'd rather have Mary. Good night." And with that last dreadful blow, Rose walked out of the room, leaving Charlie as much astonished as if one of his pet pigeons had flown in his face and pecked at him. She was so seldom angry that when her temper did get the better of her, it made a deep impression on the lads, for it was generally a righteous sort of indignation at some injustice or wrongdoing, not childish passion. Her little thunderstorm cleared off in a sob or two as she put on her things in the entry closet, and when she emerged, she looked the brighter for the shower. A hasty good night to Aunt Clara now under the hands of the hairdresser, and then she crept down to find Mary the maid. But Mary was out, so was the man, and Rose slipped away by the back door, flattering herself that she had escaped the awkwardness of having Charlie for escort. There she was mistaken, however, for the gate had hardly closed behind her when a well-known tramp was heard, and the prince was beside her, saying in a tone of penitent politeness that banished Rose's wrath like magic, "You needn't speak to me if you don't choose, but I must see you safely home, cousin." She turned at once, put out her hand, and answered heartily, "I was the cross one. Please forgive me, and let's be friends again." Now that was better than a dozen sermons on the beauty of forgiveness, and did Charlie more good, for it showed him how sweet humility was, and proved that Rose practiced as she preached. He shook the hand warmly, then drew it through his arm, and said, as if anxious to recover the good opinion with the loss of which he had been threatened, "Look here, Rosie, I've put the ring back, and I'm going to try again, but you don't know how hard it is to stand being laughed at." "Yes, I do. Ariadne plagues me every time I see her because I don't wear earrings after all the trouble I had getting ready for them." "Ah, but her twaddle isn't half as bad as the chaffing I get. It takes a deal of pluck to hold out when you are told you are tied to an apron string and all that sort of thing," sighed Charlie. "I thought you had a deal of pluck, as you call it. The boys all say you are the bravest of the 7, said Rose. "So I am, about some things, but I cannot bear to be laughed at." "It is hard, but if one is right, won't that make it easier?" "Not to me. It might to a pious parson like Arch." "Please don't call him names. I guess he has what is called moral courage, and you physical courage. Uncle explained the difference to me, and moral is the best, though often it doesn't look so," said Rose, thoughtfully. Charlie didn't like that, and answered quickly, "I don't believe he'd stand it any better than I do if he had those fellows at him. Perhaps that's why he keeps out of their way and wants you to." Rose had him there, and Charlie felt it, but would not give in just yet, though he was going fast, for somehow, in the dark, he seemed to see things clearer than in the light, and found it very easy to be confidential when it was only Rose. "If he was my brother now, he'd have some right to interfere," began Charlie in an injured tone. "I wish he was," cried Rose. "So do I," answered Charlie, and then they both laughed at his inconsistency. The laugh did them good, and when Prince spoke again, it was in a different tone, pensive, not proud nor perverse. "You see, it's hard upon me that I have no brothers and sisters. The others are better off, and needn't go abroad for chums if they don't like. I am all alone, and I'd be thankful even for a little sister."
Rose thought that very pathetic, and, overlooking the uncomplimentary word even in that last sentence, she said with a timid sort of earnestness that conquered her cousin at once, "Play I was a little sister. I know I'm silly, but perhaps I'm better than nothing, and I dearly love to do it." "So should I, and we will, for you are not silly, my dear, but a very sensible girl, we all think, and I'm proud to have you for a sister. There now." And Charlie looked down at the curly head bobbing along beside him with real affection in his face. Rose gave a skip of pleasure and laid one sealskin mitten over the other on his arm as she said happily, "That's so nice of you. Now you needn't be lonely anymore, and I'll try to fill Archie's place till he comes back, for I know he will, as soon as you let him."
Well, I don't mind telling you that while he was my mate, I never missed brothers and sisters or wanted anyone else. But since he cast me off, I'll be hanged if I don't feel as forlorn as old Crusoe before Friday turned up. This burst of confidence confirmed Rose in her purpose of winning Charlie's mentor back to him, but she said no more, contented to have done so well. They parted excellent friends, and Prince went home, wondering why a fellow didn't mind saying things to a girl or woman which they would die before they'd own to another fellow. Rose also had some sage reflections upon the subject, and fell asleep thinking that there were a great many curious things in this world, and feeling that she was beginning to find out some of them. Next day she trudged up the hill to see Archie, and having told him as much as she thought best about her talk with Charlie, begged him to forget and forgive. "I've been thinking that perhaps I ought to, though I am in the right. I'm no end fond of Charlie, and he's the best-hearted lad alive. But he can't say no, and that will play the mischief with him if he does not take care," said Archie in his grave, kind way. "While Father was home, I was very busy with him, so Prince got into a set I don't like. They try to be fast and think it's manly, and they flatter him and lead him on to do all sorts of things, play for money and bet and loaf about. I hate to have him do so, and tried to stop it, but went to work the wrong way, so we got into a mess. He is all ready to make up if you don't say much, for he owned to me he was wrong. But I don't think he will own it to you in words," began Rose. "I don't care for that. If he'll just drop those rowdies and come back, I'll hold my tongue and not preach. I wonder if he owes those fellows money, and so doesn't like to break off till he can pay it. I hope not, but don't dare to ask, though perhaps Steve knows. He's always after Prince, more's the pity," and Archie looked anxious. "I think Steve does know, for he talked about debts of honor the day I gave him." There, Rose stopped short and turned scarlet. But Archie ordered her to fess and had the whole story in 5 minutes, for none dared disobey the chief. He completed her affliction by putting a $5 bill into her pocket by main force, looking both indignant and resolute as he said, "Never do so again, but send Steve to me if he is afraid to go to his father. Charlie had nothing to do with that. He wouldn't borrow a penny of a girl, don't think it. But that's the harm he does Steve, who adores him and tries to be like him in all things. Don't say a word. I'll make it all right, and no one shall blame you." "Oh, me, I always make trouble by trying to help, and then letting out the wrong thing," sighed Rose, much depressed by her slip of the tongue. Archie comforted her with the novel remark that it was always best to tell the truth, and made her quite cheerful by promising to heal the breach with Charlie as soon as possible. He kept his word so well that the very next afternoon, as Rose looked out of the window, she beheld the joyful spectacle of Archie and Prince coming up the avenue, arm in arm, as of old, talking away as if to make up for the unhappy silence of the past weeks. Rose dropped her work, hurried to the door, and, opening it wide, stood there smiling down upon them so happily that the faces of the lads brightened as they ran up the steps, eager to show that all was well with them. "Here's our little peacemaker," said Archie, shaking hands with vigor. But Charlie added, with a look that made Rose very proud and happy, "And my little sister." Chapter 24. Which? "Uncle, I have discovered what girls are made for," said Rose, the day after the reconciliation of Archie and the prince. "Well, my dear, what is it?" asked Dr. Alec, who was planking the deck, as he called his daily promenade up and down the hall. "To take care of boys," answered Rose, quite beaming with satisfaction as she spoke. "Phoebe laughed when I told her and said she thought girls had better learn to take care of themselves first, but that's because she hasn't got 7 boy cousins as I have." "She is right, nevertheless, Rosie, and so are you, for the two things go together, and in helping 7 lads, you are unconsciously doing much to improve one lass," said Dr. Alec, stopping to nod and smile at the bright-faced figure resting on the old bamboo chair, after a lively game of battledore and shuttlecock, in place of a run which a storm prevented. "Am I? I'm glad of that. But really, Uncle, I do feel as if I must take care of the boys, for they come to me in all sorts of troubles and ask advice, and I like it so much. Only I don't always know what to do, and I'm going to consult you privately and then surprise them with my wisdom." "All right, my dear. What's the first worry? I see you have something on your little mind, so come and tell Uncle." Rose put her arm in his, and pacing to and fro, told him all about Charlie, asking what she could do to keep him straight and be a real sister to him. "Could you make up your mind to go and stay with Aunt Clara a month?" asked the doctor when she ended. "Yes, sir, but I shouldn't like it. Do you really want me to go?" "The best cure for Charlie is a daily dose of rose water, or rose and water, or rose and water. Will you go and see that he takes it?" laughed Dr. Alec. "You mean that if I'm there and try to make it pleasant, he will stay at home and keep out of mischief?" "Exactly." "But could I make it pleasant? He would want the boys." "No danger, but he'd have the boys, for they swarm after you like bees after their queen. Haven't you found that out? Aunt Plen often says they never used to be here half so much before I came, but I never thought I made the difference. It seemed so natural to have them round. Little Modesty doesn't know what a magnet she is, but she will find it out some day," and the doctor softly stroked the cheek that had grown rosy with pleasure at the thought of being so much loved. "Now you see, if I move the magnet to Aunt Clara's, the lads will go there as sure as iron to steel, and Charlie will be so happy at home he won't care for these mischievous mates of his, I hope," added the doctor, well knowing how hard it was to wean a 17-year-old boy from his first taste of what is called seeing life, which, alas, often ends in seeing death. "I'll go, Uncle, right away. Aunt Clara is always asking me and will be glad to get me. I shall have to dress and dine late and see lots of company and be very fashionable, but I'll try not to let it hurt me. And if I get in a puzzle or worried about anything, I can run to you," answered Rose, goodwill conquering timidity. So it was decided, and without saying much about the real reason for this visit, Rose was transplanted to Aunt Clara's, feeling that she had a work to do, and very eager to do it well. Dr. Alec was right about the bees, for the boys did follow their queen, and astonished Mrs. Clara by their sudden assiduity in making calls, dropping in to dinner, and getting up evening frolics. Charlie was a devoted host and tried to show his gratitude by being very kind to his little sister, for he guessed why she came, and his heart was touched by her artless endeavors to help him be good. Rose often longed to be back in the old house with the simpler pleasures and more useful duties of the life there,
But having made up her mind, in spite of Phoebe, that girls were made to take care of boys, here motherly little soul found much to enjoy in the new task she had undertaken. It was a pretty sight to see the one earnest, sweet-faced girl among the flock of tall lads trying to understand, to help, and please them with a patient affection that worked many a small miracle unperceived. Slang, rough manners, and careless habits were banished or bettered by the presence of a little gentlewoman. And all the manly virtues cropping up were encouraged by the hearty admiration bestowed upon them by one whose good opinion all valued more than they confessed. While Rose tried to imitate the good qualities she praised in them, to put away her girlish vanities and fears, to be strong and just, and frank and brave, as well as modest, kind, and beautiful. This trial worked so well that when the month was over, Mac and Steve demanded a visit in their turn, and Rose went, feeling that she would like to hear grim Aunt Jane say, as Aunt Clara did at parting, "I wish I could keep you all my life, dear." After Mac and Steve had had their turn, Archie and company bore her away for some weeks, and with them she was so happy she felt as if she would like to stay forever if she could have Uncle Alec also. Of course, Aunt Myra could not be neglected, and with secret despair, Rose went to the mausoleum, as the boys called her gloomy abode. Fortunately, she was very near home, and Dr. Alec dropped in so often that her visit was far less dismal than she expected. Between them, they actually made Aunt Myra laugh heartily more than once, and Rose did her so much good by letting in the sunshine, singing about the silent house, cooking wholesome messes, and amusing the old lady with funny little lectures on physiology, that she forgot to take her pills and gave up Mum's elixir, because she slept so well after the long walks and drives she was beguiled into taking that she needed no narcotic. So the winter flew rapidly away, and it was May before Rose was fairly settled again at home. They called her the monthly Rose because she had spent a month with each of the aunts, and left such pleasant memories of bloom and fragrance behind her that all wanted the family flower back again. Dr. Alec rejoiced greatly over his recovered treasure, but as the time drew near when his year of experiment ended, he had many a secret fear that Rose might like to make her home for the next 12-month with Aunt Jessie or even Aunt Clara for Charlie's sake. He said nothing, but waited with much anxiety for the day when the matter should be decided, and while he waited, he did his best to finish as far as possible the task he had begun so well. Rose was very happy now, being out nearly all day, enjoying the beautiful awakening of the world, for spring came bright and early, as if anxious to do its part. The old horse chestnuts budded round her windows, green things sprung up like magic in the garden under her hands. Hardy flowers bloomed as fast as they could, the birds sang blithely overhead, and every day a chorus of pleasant voices cried, "Good morning, cousin, isn't it jolly weather?" No one remembered the date of the eventful conversation which resulted in the doctor's experiment, no one but himself at least, so when the aunts were invited to tea one Saturday, they came quite unsuspiciously, and were all sitting together having a social chat when Brother Alec entered with 2 photographs in his hand. "Do you remember that?" he said, showing one to Aunt Clara, who happened to be nearest. "Yes, indeed, it is very like her when she came. Quite her sad, unchildlike expression and thin little face with the big dark eyes." The picture was passed round, and all agreed that it was very like Rose a year ago. This point being settled, the doctor showed the second picture, which was received with great approbation and pronounced a charming likeness. It certainly was, and a striking contrast to the first one, for it was a blooming, smiling face, full of girlish spirit and health, with no sign of melancholy, though the soft eyes were thoughtful, and the lines about the lips betrayed a sensitive nature. Dr. Alec set both photographs on the chimney-piece and, falling back a step or two, surveyed them with infinite satisfaction for several minutes, then wheeled round, saying briefly as he pointed to the two faces, "Time is up. How do you think my experiment has succeeded, ladies?" "Bless me, so it is!" cried Aunt Plenty, dropping a stitch in her surprise. "Beautifully, dear," answered Aunt Peace, smiling entire approval. "She certainly has improved, but appearances are deceitful, and she had no constitution to build upon," croaked Aunt Myra. "I am willing to allow that, as far as mere health goes, the experiment is a success," graciously observed Aunt Jane, unable to forget Rose's kindness to her Mac. "So am I, and I'll go farther, for I really do believe Alec has done wonders for the child. She will be a beauty in 2 or 3 years," added Aunt Clara, feeling that she could say nothing better than that. "I always knew he would succeed, and I'm so glad you all allow it, for he deserves more credit than you know, and more praise than he will ever get," cried Aunt Jessie, clapping her hands with an enthusiasm that caused Jamie's little red stocking to wave like a triumphal banner in the air. Dr. Alec made them a splendid bow, looking much gratified, and then said soberly, "Thank you. Now, the question is, shall I go on? For this is only the beginning. None of you know the hindrances I've had, the mistakes I've made, the study I've given the case, and the anxiety I've often felt. Sister Myra is right. Is one thing, Rose is a delicate creature, quick to flourish in the sunshine, and is quick to droop without it. She has no special weakness, but inherits her mother's sensitive nature and needs the wisest, tenderest care to keep a very ardent little soul from wearing out a finely organized little body. I think I have found the right treatment, and with you to help me, I believe we may build up a lovely and a noble woman who will be a pride and comfort to us all." There Dr. Alec stopped to get his breath, for he had spoken very earnestly, and his voice got a little husky over the last words. A gentle murmur from the aunts seemed to encourage him, and he went on with an engaging smile, for the good man was slyly trying to win all the ladies to vote for him when the time came. "Now, I don't wish to be selfish or arbitrary, because I am her guardian, and I shall leave Rose free to choose for herself. We all want her, and if she likes to make her home with any of you rather than with me, she shall do so. In fact, I encouraged her visits last winter, that she might see what we can all offer her, and judge where she will be happiest. Is not that the fairest way? Will you agree to abide by her choice as I do?" "Yes, we will," said all the aunts, in quite a flutter of excitement at the prospect of having Rose for a whole year. "Good. She will be here directly, and then we will settle the question for another year."
A most important year, mind you, for she has got a good start and will blossom rapidly now if all goes well with her. So I beg of you, don't undo my work, but deal very wisely and gently with my little girl. For if any harm come to her, I think it would break my heart." As he spoke, Dr. Alec turned his back abruptly and affected to be examining the pictures again. But the aunts understood how dear the child was to the solitary man who had loved her mother years ago, and who now found his happiness in cherishing the little Rose who was so like her. The good ladies nodded and sighed, and telegraphed to one another that none of them would complain if not chosen, or ever try to rob Brother Alec of his heart's delight, as the boys called Rose. Just then a pleasant sound of happy voices came up from the garden, and smiles broke out on all serious faces. Dr. Alec turned at once, saying, as he threw back his head, "There she is, now for it." The cousins had been a-Maying, and soon came flocking in laden with the spoils. "Here is our bonny Scotch Rose with all her thorns about her," said Dr. Alec, surveying her with unusual pride and tenderness, as she went to show Aunt Peace her basket full of early flowers, fresh leaves, and curious lichens.
"Leave your clutter in the hall, boys, and sit quietly down if you choose to stop here, for we are busy," said Aunt Plenty, shaking her finger at the turbulent clan, who were bubbling over with the jollity born of spring sunshine and healthy exercise. "Of course we choose to stay. Wouldn't miss our Saturday high tea for anything," said the chief, as he restored order among his men with a nod, a word, and an occasional shake.
"What is up? A court-martial?" asked Charlie, looking at the assembled ladies with affected awe and real curiosity, for these faces betrayed that some interesting business was afloat. Dr. Alec explained in a few words, which he made as brief and calm as he could, but the effect was exciting nevertheless, for each of the lads began at once to bribe, entice, and wheedle our cousin to choose his home. "You really ought to come to us for Mother's sake, as a relish, you know, for she must be perfectly satiated with boys," began Archie, using the strongest argument he could think of at the moment. "Oh, do! We'll never slam or bounce at you or call you Fraid Cat if you only will," besought Geordie and Will, distorting their countenances in the attempt to smile with overpowering sweetness. "And I'll always wash my hands 'fore I touch you, and you shall be my dolly, 'cause Pokey's gone away, and I'll love you hard," cried Jamie, clinging to her with his chubby face full of affection. "Brothers and sister ought to live together, especially when the brother needs someone to make home pleasant for him," added Charlie, with the wheedlesome tone and look that Rose always found so difficult to resist. "You had her longest, and it's our turn now. Mac needs her more than you do, Prince, for she's the light of his eyes, he says. Come, Rose, choose us, and I'll never use the musky pomade you hate again as long as I live," said Steve, with his most killing air, as he offered this noble sacrifice. Mac peered wistfully over his goggles, saying in an unusually wide-awake and earnest way, "Do, cousin, then we can study chemistry together. My experiments don't blow up very often now, and the gases aren't at all bad when you get used to them." Rose, meantime, had stood quite still,
with the flowers dropping from her hands as her eyes went from one eager face to another, while smiles rippled over her own at the various enticements offered her. During the laugh that followed Mac's handsome proposition, she looked at her uncle, whose eyes were fixed on her with an expression of love and longing that went to her heart. "Ah, yes," she thought, "he wants me most. I've often longed to give him something that he wished for very much, and now I can." So when, at a sudden gesture from Aunt Peace, silence fell, Rose said slowly, with a pretty color in her cheeks and a beseeching look about the room, as if asking pardon of the boys, "It's very hard to choose when everybody is so fond of me. Therefore, I think I'd better go to the one who seems to need me most." "No, dear, the one you love the best and will be happiest with," said Dr. Alec quickly, as a doleful sniff from Aunt Myra and a murmur of "My sainted Caroline" made Rose pause and look that way. "Take time, cousin. Don't be in a hurry to make up your mind, and remember, Codlin's your friend," added Charlie, hopeful still. "I don't want any time. I know who I love best, who I'm happiest with, and I choose Uncle. Will he have me?" cried Rose, in a tone that produced a sympathetic thrill among the hearers. It was so full of tender confidence and love. If she really had any doubt, the look in Dr. Alec's face banished it without a word, as he opened wide his arms and she ran into them, feeling that home was there. No one spoke for a minute, but there were signs of emotion among the aunts, which warned the boys to bestir themselves before the waterworks began to play. So they took hands and began to prance about uncle and niece, singing, with sudden inspiration, the nursery rhyme, "Ring around a rosy." Of course, that put an end to all sentiment, and Rose emerged laughing from Dr. Alec's bosom, with the mark of a waistcoat button nicely imprinted on her left cheek.
He saw it and said with a merry kiss that half effaced it, "This is my ewe lamb, and I have set my mark on her, so no one can steal her away." That tickled the boys, and they set up a shout of, "Uncle had a little lamb." But Rose hushed the noise by slipping into the circle and making them dance prettily like lads and lasses round a maypole, while Phoebe, coming in with fresh water for the flowers, began to twitter, chirp, and coo as if all the birds of the air had come to join in the spring revel of the 8 cousins.
End of the ebook 8 Cousins.